Okay, so this is one of the gates that leads into the area which is commonly known as the northern defences. Yes, it's extremely narrow and until recently has been completely filled up with household refuse, asbestos sheets, everything that nobody wanted in their homes ended up in one of these areas. But it's quite remarkable to remove all of that and find these towns in such a good condition. Now what we are really going through will be, in many ways, it was a murder pit. This was designed so that if the enemy ever followed what are the defenders into the upper areas, they are funneled into a very narrow corridor where one cannot see the enemy in those dark areas, whereas our silhouettes are totally exposed where we are. And what we will see is a whole series of retrenchment positions which are at a world level. They're just on a class of their own. And we will see this throughout the northern defences. So yes, this is just one of the many entrances that we have into the area. Okay, this is another, I think, fantastic, charming spot that we've been able to expose. The whole area is completely covered with household refuse. It had been used as a tipping area. Some of the original sort of balustrades was completely destroyed under the weight of that. But again, I think it's remarkable that we've had a team here working continuously for years, just removing all this rubbish. And even though there are those that disrespect the site, they don't clean after themselves, the reality is that we're now starting to retrieve what is a fantastic asset that will be introduced back into the community. So in looking for the round tower, and you were asking me whether I always had a special interest in it. The northern defences generally have always fascinated me, but the round tower or the event in 1705, this is where 200 people died. It was part of the rock that was captured, and so it rekindled my flame in terms of trying to find it. And reading through many of the texts and also coming across these features, these are the sort of clues that one is looking at. Here what we can find, it's clearly a gate which right now doesn't lead to anything. The cliff below has been scarped, but clearly there's been a significant effort in creating what is a doorway somewhere. When you also look at this cliff, it provides a blind spot to the defenders. Now, the last thing that you want is a blind spot so close to your main gate. So if one has to place a tower or a lookout, it makes sense to have it at the end or on top of this area. So this is where we started to start looking for clues. And already from the University of College London, I received some plans which start making mention of certain areas. And there was a fascinating one which for the first time I saw, which stated le rue à le torre, or la communication à le torre. So already there were more than just clues. There were now texts saying that this was a link to what is this tower. So from here we then ventured into another area, and that's when we start digging. That's when we start removing foliage to see if we could find any traces of construction. It gets reported during the Great Siege that this tower was completely destroyed by a cannon shot. This was built just before the British capture of Gibraltar. So yes, cannon shots would completely weaken a structure and eventually would fall. Just like many of the defences around the northern defences were completely breached by continuous attacks. The Great Siege almost lasted 4 years. So it's remarkable, if anything, still. Most of the town area was completely destroyed. But what's fascinating about this tower is that we're stepping on an area which would have been covered with blood back in 1705. And the enemy not only were able to climb these cliffs, but were able to capture this fortification. And I know we refer to it as the round tower, and the texts refer to it as that, but the Spanish would refer to it as el pastel, because you don't need the height of a common tower. We've got it already. So it would look more like a bastion. And then the attack continued all the way through to the king's lines, hoping to breach those defences. So that assault was not successful, but the courage and the ultimate price that many paid is something which is remarkable.
And the discovery of the location of this tower has been a journey. Tell me a bit about it.
Again, it's curiosity and reading through diaries where there are specific mentions of events. But when it comes to this one, I think it's the courage displayed by both the attacker and the defender in what they tried to achieve. So looking for little clues, in many cases it refers to a trench along the king's lines that led to the round tower, finding gateways, and all these things each time or every day would reveal a different clue that was which added credibility to all those texts. And I think the most important one was this location. Call me a military nerd, but if I had to design what is a fortification that looks out. It has commanding views. It offers warning to the defenders. This is it. Even today we see a Second World War structure on the same location. In fact, behind me we have what is a more modern tower, this time inside the safety of the rock itself.
And on this tour today, we've seen so much history from all sorts of different eras, but this area isn't currently officially open to the public.
It isn't officially open to the public, although it is a construction site, and you've seen the workers working there. But I'm a firm believer of opening these fantastic sites to a community, to visitors. I think we're very proud of what we have. At the same time, it's sad to see that not all of us share that passion. So there has been graffiti, there has been damage, and people that walk the dogs here do not clean after them. And if I were to at least plead to our communities, like, yes, I'm more than welcome for them to visit these areas, but let's be a bit more respectful of what has happened here in the past.
And expressions of interest have been invited by the government for the management of the site. What stage is that process at?
Government is currently reviewing what are some submissions. As you can see, it is a very complex site, and so it cannot be something which is reviewed over a couple of days. I would estimate it will take a series of weeks to try and see exactly what is the best we can get from this site, which is both sustainable, but also I think is available for many to be able to appreciate.
What kind of things have you seen in the submissions?
Many of the submissions I think have been party to what is expected. I'm a firm believer of having these sort of sites being put to a modern use. So for this site, the sort of things that I have proposed, and I think the government has been receptive to, has been offering what is an adventure sort of area. So there are areas for nerds like myself, that would like to know about the history, but there are sites which we can use for potential rock climbing and even zip lines. And so the adventure area that this site can offer, I think, is fantastic. And yes, then it's through that process or through that very process, one can educate themselves on how did this area ever, how did it evolve, how was it used. So that's what I would like to push for.
What eras does this site cover history-wise?
Wow, yeah. This is what's fascinating about the rock, and the northern defences, that I would say you're probably talking about a millennium. This is what's fascinating. In many sites, many cities have a specific chapter in history where they have been very influential. Rivers have become boundaries, and those castles have dictated those political boundaries. And then once the politics change, they stop serving the same function or significance. Gibraltar has offered what is a historical significance for over 1,000 years, at least on the military side. From what is a Moorish occupation, you see a whole strata of medieval and the Spanish periods. You've got what is the British in different sections. So it's all this layering, which is just incredible. And I think that's what gives this site, or Gibraltar, such a fantastic appeal to many. And sometimes it becomes a point of debate or contention where some will argue to go back to the original structure. Well, what is that original? Do we remove the Second World War elements because they're more recent? Are we saying the Second World War didn't play its part in history? So there is a debate here. But I think what's fantastic, and we should not lose sight of, is the amount of layering, which is what I feel is of importance.
Because for the past kind of 60 years, 70 years, this site has really been kind of abandoned and left for teenagers to explore, that kind of thing.
Correct. This was, I think I was mentioning it before, it's almost like a rite of passage for a teenager. Going to the jungle is something that your parents would have you hide on. But yes, it's been allowed in many ways to decay. And it has always been a challenge. So I think it's remarkable that we've ventured or gone into this adventure of clearing out what has been thousands of tons of rubble, not really knowing what to get. So it's commendable that an administration has put the will behind resurrecting a project, and thankfully we are finding what we have is, like the Deputy Chief Minister said, it's a gem that we are now starting to polish.
This area is obviously a passion of yours. You speak so animatedly about the history. What would you like to see happen here? What's your vision? There's it's a good question. There's two sides of it. There's that nerdy sort of side of me that would like to see the history coming through, but I also realize that does not appeal to the overall public. So I think my heart goes out to our community. Now, what do they need? What do they want? There's a whole push for having a healthier lifestyle and fitness training. So if some of the sites could be used, we've got 159 steps, I think, on the upper level. That is already a trek in itself. So for those who seek what is outdoor activities, there's that. Those that want to know about the history,
history. I would think there's room, you've seen some of the chambers, to try and display that history of what happened to these chambers. I think is also an attractive one. But then probably what I'm more biased towards is that having a pint or having a drink just to chill out here in this sort of setting, I think it's fantastic. These views are remarkable, are unique in the rock. So some of these areas just as a chill out spot I think are fantastic. We've got opportunities in a number of different locations. So it's a combination of different factors which gives the whole monument use. It's got to be diverse, it's got to be flexible, and I wouldn't set it in stone. I think there's room here to have activities on a seasonal basis, and depending on what the events that are happening, that we can accommodate that, and that creates extra interest.